Thank you very much for this wonderful start into the day. And I hope you're all back. And if you're not, you can, with a part of your attention, stay in your inner world and at the same time direct your focus back to the outer world. Actually, it was a great leeway also for me because I also use these techniques a lot in my work, combining person and organization perspectives. And I would like to talk about organizational development in a dialogic way, which is not a new fashion or a new product or a new label, I hope. Maybe a label, yeah? But I see it more as a headline that can help to bring people into dialogue, who are working in the organizational world with development. So what I would like to do, certainly not preach to you or convince you of anything new. I thought about all the experience in the room yesterday, and with all your experience in the field, if I take an average of 25 years and 40 people, we have 1,000 years of experience here in the room, right, of development experience. So what can I contribute, right? So just take it as my little share in it, my little part that I would like to present, and as a starter for discussion. I'd like to make one comment, and I hope that the recording still continues now. We talked about learning and business and how they are integrated or separate things. And to me, learning and business, and I stole this little abbreviation from Roland Deiser, should be basically the same, and learning should inspire business, and business should inspire learning in a mutual cycle of an upward spiral. But what I find mostly still in reality is there is the business leaders who tell the HR people what the organization has to learn, and then they organize trainings. But this is throwing away all the potential from the learning side to actually generate new business opportunities. So for this, you need a cycle like that. And this is what I would like to share with you, how I try to do that in my practice, how that, to me, fits with this term of Dialogic OD. I also try to bring across the concept of Gervase Bushe, who wrote this new book, which you will find, or he edited the new book, which you will find on that table, and talk a little bit about that, and just share some insights from this work with you. So I often use pictures also when I work in organizations, and many are facing a situation like this these days, that the old ways, the old patterns of organizing are not working any longer. Just think about digitalization and this big challenge. Or maybe the environment has changed and somehow they realize we can't go on like that. Or maybe they are playing, but there is no audience because customers are going elsewhere. So there could be different reasons for change, obviously, and this is about how to orchestrate or organize change in a way that is collaborative, that has full commitment and engagement by the people in the organization to design and to create their own future. 3 parts, some useful frameworks about leading and enabling change. I would like to show you some frameworks that I use in my work, and that are combining dialogic elements into hopefully simple pictures. Talk about dialogic organizational development as a new generative image. Generative image is a term which is often used in the book and in this practice, and it means an image, a symbol, a picture, a metaphor that serves to start sense-making discussions. So in this respect, that's how I understand or interpret Dialogic OD. Nothing to push on you, but something that can start discussions. And I'd like also to share with you the model that myself and together with my colleague Joachim Schwendenmein from Vienna that we wrote about amplifying change, which is the idea, or our task was to think about what happens in a dialogic OD process, what can we do as facilitators after we had a great start with dialogic events? Because, you know, large group events, open space, or all kinds of large group designs, we all know that. They create lots of engagement, they create new initiatives, new thoughts, new tracks, maybe work streams, and then very often, you know, it's versandet, as we say in German. It kind of slows down and many things don't get realized. And so our task was to think about how can we keep it going, the engagement, which was also, it's not an answer, but it's some ideas about that. So here's a development framework which I think serves to connect business and learning quite well, and which I use with management teams. I try to put in the 5 core questions. What do we need to do? So certainly they need to have a strategy, some processes in place, a structure and tools and methods. This is all what we used to call hard facts, the things you can design in a task force, basically. That's not how you should do it, but you can design these things. Then there is the how, the cultural capabilities on the other axis. How do we do this? This is a question of identity, values, behaviors, skills. How do you practically do it? And development, organizational development happens in a corridor, because many organizations, they try to get up here to have the perfect strategy and the perfect design, and they can buy this from one of the big 5 consultancies. However, if it's not co-created together, it will not have a lot of impact. It will not really be sustainable. On the other hand, if we just do cultural development for the sake of it, you know, let's all have dialogue and have better relationships, but we have no strategy and no efficient process, it also doesn't help us. We will not realize the performance capability that we could have, but we will be somewhere down here. So this is not enough. We also need the question, why are we doing what we're doing? Purpose, shared sense-making, shared inspiration, and some kind of picture or image about our desired future. What are we doing this for? What is our generative image, maybe about the future? And this has all been, you know, long practice in OD, I think. And what is now getting more and more prominent is a 5th quality, which I call nowness. I don't know a better word in English. This is about the question, what matters right now, in this moment, in this team, or in this organization. So this is about mindfulness. This is about a spirit of inquiry. This is about real-time feedback. And usually when I come in the entry phase to a management team, I use some of these questions. Not usually, I don't show the model, but the model is in my head, but I use these questions to get into a discussion. So you could say, well then, okay, we have a plan. We have all this. If you do it the traditional way, you think you're ready to go at mile 0. Let's go. Unfortunately, after a while, you realize the map is not the territory, and you are encountering some obstacles. Maybe after a while, there is no more paved road. And maybe after another while, you're in the middle of the swamp. Because the traditional approach of making a plan, a change plan for the next 24 months, simply doesn't work anymore. We all know that, but many business leaders still believe it works. And so sometimes, you know, just getting into a conversation with some examples can help. Now, there's also, of course, support from literature, from research for this. Probably you know the Snowden Boon model. I'm not sure. I just want to mention it briefly. It was an HBR article in 2007 saying that we basically, what the leadership style or also the way how we approach change needs to correspond with context, the context we're in. The context can be an obvious context. This means a situation that is well known, that we have seen hundreds of times before, where basically the events that can happen are quite clear. We can categorize them, and then we know what to do. For example, in the article, they say it's like in a call center. You basically know when a customer calls, you can categorize what kind of complaint or what kind of request this is, and then you have a pre-prepared, basically, routine how to deal with it. We also have complicated contexts. They are more complex, rising complexity. Then we probably need experts. We need to bring together a group of people with different interdisciplinary expertise and knowledge, and they will figure out a solution. So this is typically where we can sense what's going on. We need to analyze it, but we will find a solution, and then we respond. So in a complicated context, which is where most current OD models are still based on, it assumes that there is a solution. And we need to have an analysis. The whole survey, research, and feedback method is based on this. We do surveys, we identify the problem issues, and then we address them. However, with globalization and virtualization and digitalization, more and more contexts are actually complex. And in a complex context, we all know that there is no one solution, but we can only try to make sense. We can probe, we can try out a next step, see how it works, what happens, learn from that, and then respond, with what we do next. So I cannot have a longer-term plan. I can have a big picture of my desired future, but then I go step by step. And then we also have more and more these chaotic contexts. The example in the article is 9/11, things that cannot be predetermined and for which we cannot have a routine and where we don't have the time to try things. So in this, again, the management logic or leadership logic or change logic is different. We need to act first and then sense and then respond. So Rudolph Giuliani is a good example in this article, who in the 9/11 events in New York immediately was able to bring some calm to the situation and basically say, this is a terrible event, however, we will survive, we will go on. So he was he did the right thing in this situation, being very authoritative in a way. They're very directive. Now, interestingly enough, for this situation, this was the right leadership style, but there are also some reports that in other situations, that he always had this style. So also before these events, he was a very directive person, and he was actually not very much loved in other contexts. So as you see, leadership is situational. We talked about that yesterday, and so must be our development approach. Basically, we can see two paradigms of organizational change. This is a lot of text, and I'm not going into the details. You will have the presentation later. The traditional one, and which I would say the more emerging or newer one, and each of these bullet points have their opposite, right? So, of course, I'm contrasting for the purpose of getting into a conversation. In reality, we always have mixed forms, of course, but we will find some kind of maybe preference. The old paradigm, unfreeze, move, refreeze. Kurt, is it pronounced Lewin or Levine in English? Lewin. There are both versions, I think. Yeah. So the basic assumption here was that organizations are, or people, in a way, are quite stable systems, and then in an equilibrium maybe, and then you have to first unfreeze this, move it to a next level, and then freeze it again. Now, well, we all see how quick things are turning these days in our VUCA world, and now actually, as Deborah Rowland puts it, we must turn around this paradigm. We must freeze first, which means mindfulness. Realize, push the pause button and realize what we are doing. Look from the perspective of the inner observer. Then adapt within the pause mode, if you want, and then unfreeze and start doing new things. So it's actually a totally turnaround of the paradigm, more grounded in systemic thinking. Change in this respect can start anywhere in the system, and it's about unfolding potential more than closing gaps. Now, when I talk with management teams, they very often have this gap thinking. They have a perfect solution, this axis in their mind, and then they want everyone to close the gap, and they come with assessments and stuff like that of gaps, not of potential. It's about this is about hierarchy and control, but this is about influence and snowball effects, and we talked a lot about this yesterday. So also we're shifting the attention more to social, political, and psychodynamic topics. It's about co-creating and embodying, really feeling and sensing the new. And we will talk about different qualities or energies in the system, and we don't talk about resistance. You can look this up. I'm not going to explain all of these points. It's just going to be too much. But one thing, when we talk about learning, I have some indicators that help me build hypotheses. Typically, organizations who run in this paradigm, they talk about training. Organizations who run in this paradigm, they talk about learning. So I can give you already some ideas of the context which you're operating in. And these talk more about learning from experience, and these talk, or at least try to learn from the emerging future. As Bernd in the morning, as you said, you could also get a sense of the future that wants to emerge. And the role of the consultant is different. Here he is more a facilitator or reflection partner, but in this paradigm he was more an expert or executor, someone who you rent to get your things done. Now, this is a framework that I find most helpful, and it was developed by Deborah Rowland and Malcolm Hicks, who wrote a great book called Sustaining Change. And they looked at real-life organizational change projects and their success rates and the patterns that were used in the change processes. And they identified success by the perception of the stakeholders. So they were interviewing the people who started the project, the people who worked on the project, and the people who were affected to identify was it successful. And they found basically 4 categories. And this really, I'm using this now in every project, so I would like to share this with you. When you look at content and process, both can be either predefined, someone thinks about it and defines it, or it can be co-created and emerge on the way as you go on. Now, if content and process is predefined, that's what they call the directive approach. Someone says, we need to go here and there, these are the goals, and here's what I want you to do. So it's about tell and sell. You will find rollouts and rollout plans. You will find predefined deliverables, what a project has to bring. And the mental model is, I can manage change. And many leaders have this model, but also many consultants. So that's something to keep in mind. Another way is to predefine the content, but to co-create the process. This is what they call the self-assembly or IKEA approach, right? You get a package. Here you have the box with your little new cupboard. Yeah, you have a little booklet with it, and there you are. And now it's your turn to figure it out, right? So many large organizations, I think because they don't know better, they use this approach, sending out toolkits and handbooks and directives, and then people need to figure it out. So the mental model is somehow launch enough and something will stick. Yeah? And you will recognize it by initiatives, programs, toolkits that are centrally started and fed into the organization. Now, the 2 global corporates that I've worked in, they were mainly using these 2 approaches. But as we move to the other paradigm, to the right, there are more approaches. One is what they call the masterful approach. Personally, I don't use this term. I call it skillful engagement. Because what is called masterful means that there is a master of process. There is someone who thinks about the process, the architecture of the process, the platforms, how you structure the meeting or the conversation, how you structure the project. But the content is, I call it skillful engagement, because masterful implies, for me, too much power. Yeah, but it's about engagement, but done skillfully. Yeah. The mental model is, I trust my people to solve things with us from a leader perspective. And you will find words like, we need to build competencies, we need to have a learning architecture, a framework, we need to have dialogue platforms. These are the typical elements. Personally, I think most systemic consulting practice in the German-speaking countries operates in this model. If you look into the books of Königswieser, Neuwaldeck and co., you will always find these charts of change architectures, with all the steps and the stakeholders involved. Typical example of predefined process. And then the content is created. This has worked well, I think, in the 90s, and maybe still in some cases in the first decade of the new millennium. However, at least in my practice, I don't ever sell a 1-year or 2-year program anymore. Usually what I sell is mindfulness and a useful next step, connected with a big picture where we want to go. So this is more the emergent approach, where content and process is co-created. But then the mental model is completely different, because it says I can only create the conditions for change to happen, but I cannot make it happen. And this is a big challenge for leaders running, especially in shareholder, in stock-listed organizations who need to report to analysts every quarter and make sure that they have everything under control. So if you want to do more of this, you need to embrace diversity. Many organizations have this slogan now, but in my experience, usually it's just a slogan. Because I give you one example. A leader with his team, L1 leader under the board, in a global corporation with his team, strategy offsite. And I make the very humble suggestion that towards the end of the workshop, we do a little round, how everyone experienced the workshop and how confident they are that, what they have discussed, they will actually get into a realization. And I suggested that the leader hears everyone first and then talks last. And they say, yes, yes, of course. And then in the moment, the pattern kicks in, the boss stands up, summarizes the workshop, and sends everyone off. No listening, no interest in diversity. So this really is a difference between cognitive understanding and actual practical competence. Cultivating dialogue in virtual organizations is a challenge, and encouraging shared sense-making. There is a wonderful framework for shared sense-making that I use. This is the U model from Otto Scharmer from MIT, because that they actually thought about how does the new come into the world and how do we give birth to new connections and new paradigms. And they identified those 4 levels of listening. I will make a little break after this slide, so to see if you're still with me. These 4 levels, and I think this is fantastic because it's so simple. Level 1 listening, called downloading. You are running on your, someone said yesterday, pre-cooked thoughts. Right? So I'm only listening, hearing what I want to hear. I'm looking for confirmation all the time. And the things that are different, I just don't realize them. My filter is so strong. So I'm reconfirming my old habits of judgment. Example, again, real life meeting, global corporation board member with his direct reports. Everyone has to send in a presentation 1 week before the meeting. And in the meeting, everyone presents what they have sent in 1 week before the meeting. And board member listens, maybe does this or this, and the meeting is over. Nothing new is created. It's a typical form of downloading. Now, listening to, factual listening means I'm directing my attention more to what's outside of me, and I'm noticing differences. And I might start asking questions like, oh, excuse me, can you repeat that? How did you come to this conclusion? What are your data? Or maybe I would ask, this is interesting, I haven't heard about that before. Could you explain more? So I start to realize the differences, but still on a factual level. This, first of all, the first thing it requires is an open mind, but it allows to take in disconfirming new data. Next level of listening, empathic listening, we are able to build an emotional connection, and I not only understand on the cognitive level, but I also empathize on the emotional level, seeing through another person's eyes. A lot of the dialogue tradition comes from here, and all the training we've been doing in emotional intelligence since Goldman and before, of course. This requires an open heart. Now, but it's still not enough for transformation. Transformation happens if you go one level deeper into generative listening, which is listening to the meaning behind all this and what does this situation call for. So once I am deeply attuned with the system and we are all connected, I've experienced that many times, it becomes clear what we need to do. And this moment of breakthrough or insight, moment of insight, they at MIT call presensing, pre-sensing, what is wanting to come. I call it usually co-inspiration because it's not so psychological, but this requires an open will. And they came to this model interviewing 150 people around the world who were considered innovators in their fields: business, academia, consulting, artists. And everyone described more or less that same process, that the new comes in moments of insight, of deep connection. What I found interesting is that in the U model, we are talking about this, there was a letting go phase and a letting come phase. Letting go, letting come, and the crucial moment down here. And this is about something new coming, transformation into something new. But when we look at the traditional Kübler-Ross model of grief, of letting go, right? We have these phases here in the beginning, then we have the valley of tears, and then we have the same moment. So it's about letting go and letting come, and going through this transition through the in-between, which is a phase of insecurity also. But if you do it in deep connection and mindfulness, it can also be something very, at the same time, magic. Okay, now this has all been there, and many other things. And then I met Gervase Bushe 2 years ago in a training program in Vienna, where he talked about his clear leadership model. And we found out that we are very much alike in our working approach. And he told me that he was working on a new project, on a new book called Dialogic OD. And then I said, well, but that's what I'm doing. That was kind of my spontaneous reaction. Of course, it was downloading. Huh? So I'm still now searching for the fine differences and that I can learn from, and there are lots when I look into the book, of course. But this is how we got to know each other. And then he invited Joachim and myself. Joachim is the head of the Austrian Association of Group Dynamics, EGO, and which is where the training took place. And he asked the two of us to contribute a chapter to this book. this is how the connection came together. In the next stage, in the next half of my presentation, I want now to talk about the Dialogic OD approach. We are now exactly halftime, and therefore, just to check, is it, you've been listening for 30 minutes. Can you still go on? Yeah.
Can't get enough.
Two little, very, very little things that are moments like this, mini moments like this. Please take your book and a pen. Those of you who want to do it, take the pen in the other hand that you usually don't write with and write your name. You don't have to do it, but just feel it, how awkward it is when the old pattern doesn't work anymore, right? And some of you, sometimes there are people who are left-handed but have been retrained as children, and then they are able to do it both ways, right? This is like bilingual children, or so. I mean, you have made the patterns for both. So, are you happy with your results? You're still working on it, okay. Yeah. And here is another little exercise that I just learned 2 weeks ago from a colleague when we were doing a learning program together. And this one I really like. But you can only do this if you have a sheet of paper, or maybe also with your books. Please copy this to your paper, but here is the task. You can only touch the pen on the paper once, and then the pen can never leave the paper. So nicht absetzen. The pen must stay on the paper all the time. Okay? Have you at least thought about it and tried a little bit? I show you how it works so you can use this exercise with your groups. And I mean, it's just a little bit for fun now, but it's also about instigating creativity. And that actually trying out something new doesn't need to be fearful, or if you make it interesting, if you try to create lust for the new. Ed Schein already talked about survival anxiety and learning anxiety in the 1960s. And most leaders who are running in the old paradigm, in the traditional paradigm, they increase survival anxiety if they want change. So they say, we need to change, otherwise we'll be out of business, and you will all lose your jobs if you don't change. But Ed Schein already said that it's a balance, and instead of increasing survival anxiety, we can also lower learning anxiety and make it more interesting and more fun to learn. And then we will have the same effect, but with much less pain. So this is what I would like to point at. Now the solution is this. You do the circle, and then basically like this. I mean, just that's the idea. I didn't leave the paper, but you have to think out of the box, right?
I did like it.
Huh? What did you? Oh, you did it. Ah, okay. That's also a great. Okay, using a biro pen, you can, of course, they clicked away the writing. Yeah, okay. That's a creative solution as well. Now, Gervase and his co-editor, Bob Marshak, who is a professor at American University, I think. I hope I got it right now. They realized, and Gervase was also one of the co-founders of Appreciative Inquiry back in the 80s, together with Dave Cooperrider, and they were, the whole movement of the 80s and 90s about large group events, open space, real-time strategic change, appreciative inquiry. This was all about creating a moment, a shift in identity or a moment of transition in a large group. Bring the whole system in one group and try to get to this shifting point. That was the idea. And they realized that many people have been doing this. So there has been the art of convening, the art of hosting, appreciative inquiry. There has been open space. There has been, and this is 40 methods that all are based on bringing groups through this moment. And there are more, because I found this very much looked through an American lens. If we just look at the European tradition, we have our own formats and our own ways of doing this. So lots of dialogic interventions out there, but no common headline, no common practice, or common umbrella. And in that respect, they coined the term Dialogic OD as a headline for all of this, to bring together people in the dialogic practice to make it easier for them to maybe get together and talk and shared sense-making. So in a way, I think it's similar like INOC, bringing together people from the coaching field, from different cultures and nations to make sense together. This is the idea of the term Dialogic OD. Now, many of these have built a practice out of it, have built an industry out of it, and are running a business. So you can go to people and buy open space formats, and they cannot do anything else. But maybe it would be fruitful for them if they talk to people who do design thinking, for example, which is also a dialogic practice. So we can learn from each other. This was the idea behind this headline. So what they did, they discovered too much text. I know. I quoted this from the book to give you some of the original thought. They discovered 3 common threads or 3 common themes in all these interventions. One is there is a kind of disruption in the ongoing social construction of reality, which is the moment of insight. Disruption to me sounds quite violent, but I'm not a mother tongue native English, so I don't know a better word. But it could be also called, I think, going through this eye of the needle into something new. And there is a kind of generative image either introduced by leadership or it surfaces in the co-created situation that can have a kind of a guide, can be a guiding compass for the direction that we need to go. And third, a change of one or more of the core narratives takes place, which is the stories we tell about why we're here, what we're doing, what is the sense of this organization, what is our purpose. These 3 things, it's not every of these interventions will create all the 3, but at least one of the 3 they found is always in there, and in some approaches it's all the 3. And this is basically what they came up, Gervase and Bob, as a definition. Like if this is the goal of our intervention, then we're doing Dialogic OD, to make a simple definition. And there are many. Of course, there is not one way how to do it. Everyone has their own practice. This is a picture from see, now I forgot her first name. Peggy Holman, exactly, who wrote about Emergence and who is also working with large group designs. She came up with this example where there is a running system, people make sense, then there is a kind of disruption, what they're doing doesn't work anymore. Maybe because no more clients, maybe because changing environment, maybe because, whatever the influences are. There is this moment of realization that we can't go on like that. And then they start to differentiate, to really identify, but what can we do? And they come up with a new pattern, a new coherent pattern that actually means a shift in identity. And we know from nature that chaos, or also from chaos theory, that chaos produces order, right? If we just let it. But if we try to control it, it probably creates more chaos. So that's the insight behind this. This is a lot based in the American tradition here. It's based on complexity theory. In Europe, I think we came to the same insights partly by other sources, even family therapy. Yeah. So to again give you a contrast, something to make it more clear, what we say in Dialogic OD, the values, the humanistic values, are still the same that they used to be in the more traditional OD. The more traditional OD was basically a counter-movement to the very hierarchical organizations. It was the first attempt of involving people more and making organizations more democratic. But sometimes it wasn't integrated with the management practice. I think the idea now is to get to a more integrated approach. So they call the traditional approach diagnostic, and this makes a lot of sense to me when I talk to consulting colleagues. It just happened recently. I work with a colleague I have not worked with before. It's about a workshop with a management team of a large organization. The colleague wants to go there and have interviews with each individual team member before we even do the workshop. I say, but why? They will be there in the moment, and they have everything they need. They are there with their bodies, with their brains, and with their hearts. Why do you do interviews? And I think it is because someone is operating out of a diagnostic mindset, but maybe also because someone wants to deal with his own anxiety. So think about this, how do you do it? Yeah. So because in Dialogic OD our mindset is interpretive constructivism, and social reality is constructed. It's more about dialogic networks, again like INOC maybe, unless the open systems theory is not gone, but it's a different lens through which we are looking. We are not focusing so much, we are focusing on behavior and results, but first on discourse and generativity. And here again, 90% of the colleagues that I meet, they focus on behavior and results. And even sometimes because they don't even know how to work with mental models. And they don't care. Because it's the whole behaviorism approach that also was very strong coming from the States in the last wave. So maybe we are going step by step by step. I think in many regards in Europe, especially in Central Europe, here in the German-speaking communities from the systemic Keimzellen sources in Heidelberg and Vienna and other places, the dialogic approach has been long time practice. But this is not perceived, this is not realized, recognized in a global scale. So usually, those communities like maybe we are, even ISB, if you work in Asia or US, nobody knows that. So I think here this can help to say we are also an active contributor in this field, and we actually have 13 years of experience already. Change is emergent, continuous, and iterative. It's more transformational than developmental. It is developmental, but it's also transformational. The role of the consultants, and this is something to discuss maybe, the way Gervase and Bob see it, and I more and more tend to agree with that view. In the diagnostic approach, the consultant was more outside of the system. And this is also how I learned it originally, that my colleagues usually told me, my teaching colleagues, we are not part of the learning system, we stay outside. We need to keep our professional distance and so on. But in the dialogic approach, the thinking is, of course, as a consultant, we are part of the system. We are influencing the system all the time by everything we do or don't do or say or don't say, just like any other participant in the room. So we are part of the system that we are changing or working with. And actually, being an internal consultant and also a leader of learning and development units, that makes a lot of sense to me. Because especially for internal consultants, they have the chance to influence on a daily basis conversations. And change is changing conversations. People talk about different things, different people talk in different formats, and that leads to completely new outcomes. So the change processes are more hierarchical. They can start anywhere in the organization and spread out. And of course, in reality, we always have mixed forms because, as we already said yesterday, without having the leadership team somehow on board, the new initiative is at risk because it could be stopped any time if it doesn't get resources, right? So we need a little bit of both, probably. Summary, the premises of Dialogic OD, and this will be bringing owls to Athens. Reality and relationships are socially constructed. I hope we have somehow some kind of agreement on this. Organizations are meaning-making systems and continuously self-organizing anyway. But we can guide it, kind of a guided evolution instead of just let it happen. Language, broadly defined matters, like you said, Bernd, already in your little mindfulness activity. Yeah. So, and creating change requires changing conversations. Participative inquiry and engagement is used to increase differentiation before we find new coherence. One more example, real life. I was asked to help with a change project for an organization of 30,000 people, and I was invited to be in the very first project meeting as a change helper. Now, the change leader put up a slide with a project organization with about 15 boxes, a number of work streams, and in every work stream and box there was already a name. And on the following pages there were defined deliverables for each quarter. But in the meeting we were only 3 people. So I said, how did you get to this chart? Oh, we thought about it yesterday. Ah, okay. And do the people who are in the boxes know they're in the boxes? No, not yet. Because I was written in the box, communication and change. Right? My name was there also. I said, interesting. And who came up with the deliverables? Oh, yeah, but this is what we need from them. Oh, okay. Well, and then I had the same effect on me that probably the other people in these boxes had as well. I just thought, this is not going to work. Because it doesn't fit how change works, and it doesn't fit how people work. But this is how it's still done. This was 2 years ago in a global corporation. And then we wonder why our projects fail. I didn't give you the outcomes of the research, Deborah Rowland's research. 80% of the projects who are run in a directive way fail. And this matches with other publications that we have seen before. So if you want to be set up for fail, just take a directive approach. It's very simple. But how to bring this across to a person who has this strong belief? And this is, I think, where coaching can come into the play, because we need to work with the leaders who actually set up the change philosophy of a project. Yeah. Usually they say, wash me, but don't make me wet, right? Yes. So transformational change is more emergent than planned, but it can be guided. And consultants, and this is also maybe something provocative, they are not a part, but a part of the process. These are this is a summary that Joachim did. There are 8 premises in the book. It's a kind of little bit condensed. And I also put together one final picture, and then we are through with the Dialogic OD part, about some of the touch points that I identified for Dialogic OD. of course, very simplified. What and how we think, talking about this leader again, influences or shapes our decisions and actions, influences or shapes our shared assumptions and sense-making. So we do it in a certain way, it works, we believe, okay, this way works. It becomes part of the culture. And then this shapes our elements of structure and the enacted culture, how we do things around here. And this shapes again what we and how we think, especially when new members come into the organization, they are very quickly socialized by this. We all know this. Now, if we want to create change, we have different points where we can have influence. One is we can instigate what I call productive irritation. I didn't call it disruption, but a productive irritation. For example, in a large group event, what we did was we got a director of a classic orchestra, and he brought 80 musical instruments, and then everyone, it was a 4-hour intervention, and in the first hour they learned to play their instrument by following a director. And after this hour, they played for 3 minutes a little music piece with the director. And they were all so proud that they made it. And it was just fantastic. And then we said, okay, now here's a little productive irritation. Your task will now be, because it was 80 people, spread into, I don't remember, 6 or 7 groups, and compose your own symphony of learning, and then come back here and play it again, all 80 people, simultaneously, without a director. And they were like you did with the 100. And then they went into their rooms, they again had 1 hour time, this time with no instructor. And then they came back, and then they played the most fantastic musical play I've ever heard, with no director, and everybody just knew when his or her place is, and they chimed in. It was like a groove session of 80 people, unrehearsed, and with a newly created piece of music. And that was so amazing that at least half of the people were almost crying. They had tears running over their faces. And this was the end of the day, and we just did a very, very quick, give us a few words about your inner experience. And then the word that came most often was magic. And then the next day, we asked them, what does this have to do with leadership in our organization? And I think this is a kind of productive irritation that you can do, can even be disruptive without the pain, but with the experience. We can also increase differentiation by bringing in more different actors, more perspectives to the situation that can influence our decisions and actions. We can then identify new actions that lead to new results. So find out, give people permission to try something new and find out what works. Get into this kind of experimental setting. The whole design thinking trait, which comes originally from product development, can help us here. Actually, those practices are not new. We all know creativity techniques, we know innovation processes, we know systemic strategy development and all this. It didn't really catch on many managers. But now, with design thinking coming from the product side, which actually means money, suddenly they buy it. So usually what I sometimes say is, I do design thinking for management. And then they go, wow. And then I say, well, I've been doing it for 20 years. Huh? Yeah. So sometimes those labels can help us to connect. The shared assumptions and sense-making shape our structures that we build and the culture. We can make mental models transparent. We can help people work on here. And I think this is also where coaching can play a role, especially when you have some training in working with beliefs and mindsets. And it doesn't harm to have some therapeutic education here. But you don't have to have it, but it certainly doesn't, it can help, I think, especially in this point. Now, you can help to embed new elements in the system as a consultant, really help them to to realize that we need to also adapt the system if we want to sustain what works. And then nurture mindfulness and self-observation about the established system so that people are aware about what and how they think when they make their next decisions. Some touch points of Dialogic OD that I tried to give you. I have 5 minutes left, and in those 5 minutes I would like to share you it's just one more slide, the little model that I use for guiding organizations through this cycle. And it's really awkward for me to talk for 1 hour. I always like to go into interaction, but we will do it later, right? So we talked about creating a spirit of inquiry. And with my 2 little kids at home, and those of you who have children, you will know this, it seems like they are born with this spirit, right? My task, I think, is not to train it away, but actually to allow it to be there and to actually support it. Explore by doing, and risk getting your clothes wet. And now, as a parent, what do you do in this situation? Do you allow the person to explore, or do you say, get out of there?
It depends on the temperature of the water.
Okay, yeah, okay. Now, risk avoidance, of course, is another aspect in this. So I think that for amplifying change, and this is what Joachim's and my book contribution is about, we can actually organize for this kind of planned emergence. And I put a copy of our chapter on the desk in the back. It is not the printed version, because I'm not allowed to distribute the printed version. It is the version that we handed in to the publisher. And this I'm actually allowed to distribute. It's called preprint version. And there are some minor changes in the book that were made by the editors or by the publisher. But it's about 98% the same. So you can have this version if you want. We can inspire, instigate strategic dialogue, create a frame and a spirit of inquiry, establish a strategic agenda and guide by questions, and give permission and encouragement to explore, first stage. Next step is model. Model means do small experiments, small scale pilots, try out new things, and involve stakeholders in this and identify what works. In design thinking, typically what we do is we build a rough prototype, handmade. We go to our customers, stakeholders, and say, look, if something like this would exist, would it be attractive to you? And then get in an early conversation before we invest too much in something that might not work. Then, after we identify what works, we need to discuss this, and here's where leadership comes into play, in the leadership team, and really find ways. Now, the goal here is not, hopefully, to step on these small little new plants, but to identify them and to find ways to nurture, to give them more energy, resources. This is where usually we still need traditional management or gate models, because this is the decision to fund and resource projects. It refers to what you also presented yesterday in the innovation cycle. And lastly, we need to embed what works into the organization to then also sustain it. So in pictures, model, identify what works, nurture, make it grow, and embed. And it's very much like nature works, or like, we are doing it in natural life. Why not do it in organizations? Thank you very much.